Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Beth, a tutor at LSAT Demon, which you can find at lsatdemon.com, and I am also a 2L at Emory University. And today I am joined by Sam and Hayley. So, will you guys introduce yourselves? Sam.
Hey everyone, I'm Sam. I am also a 2L but not at Emory University. I am at ASU. I'm an Ask Button tutor, and I've been with LSAT Demon for a couple of years now.
I'm Hayley. I'm a 3L at the University of Utah, and I do customer service here. And I've been with the Demon for about 3.5 years now.
Cool. Today we are going to talk about some how-tos for some law school things. All of us are obviously law students. We made it through the dreaded first year of law school. We picked up some things that worked for us and some that didn't work for us. So today we're going to talk about outlining. Hayley, do you want to walk us through a little bit of what outlining is, how it's helpful? Give us some background.
For sure. So, before we even get into creating an outline, what an outline is, we want to start with what your final exams in law school look like. Your final exam is at the very end of the semester. It's typically going to cover all of the content you learned over the entire semester, and it's your whole grade. Your final grade is your grade for the whole class. You don't usually get any other grades for anything else except for maybe participation. Now, these finals can be essay, multiple choice, or a combination of both. And if it's an essay, it's typically what's called an issue spotter, where you'll have a whole story scenario, and there's a bunch of legal issues that are laid throughout the story, and you have to find them all and work through them. Now, that's important because the way you'll prep your outline will depend on what your final exam is going to look like. Now, for an outline itself, an outline is going to be a combination of your class notes, your reading notes, things your professor said, as well as things that you found helpful while you were studying and study materials or outside third-party materials, all placed in one typed up document that you can either hopefully use on the exam if your professor allows for it, or you're using it just as a study tool or a memorization tool. That's just a basic overview, but we'll go through all the specifics.
Yeah, cool. So, I have got some questions about outlining that will kind of guide a little bit of how to's. Um, so, I know that the three of us do outlining very differently. But first question for both of you is when do you start making outlines?
I guess we'll start in chronological order here. I start making mine at the first day of class, just about. I look at the syllabus and create headers for myself, kind of lump everything into it that I know is going to fall into that. And after class ends, I try to make notes to myself, pull out what I thought was significant from that class. And that's usually just going to be copied and pasted into my final outline. I don't really have much work for myself at the end of the semester and finalizing it.
I take a very different approach. I build my outline pretty much entirely at the very end of the semester. Unless I have a midterm, then I'll do it shortly before the midterm. I use mine more as a memorization tool. So I take really good class notes, really good reading notes, and then I pair all those together in an outline shortly before the actual final exam.
How do you actually make an outline? I know, Sam, you kind of alluded to this of you're looking at the syllabus, things like that, and Haley, you're looking at notes, but more detail on how you're making it?
Sure. I think this one is hyper specific about what type of final exam it is. So if you have a pure issue spotter, I generally like to kind of build myself an outline of, in the sense of what I'm walking through. If I encounter this issue, like diversity jurisdiction, I know that I'm going to need to analyze these elements. But if I get like a multiple choice exam, I know that it's more so finding the right answer and not really explaining why. So I'm not going to add the detail that I would an issue spotter of. This is the policy reason behind this answer. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to start with my one dispositive thing, which means the thing that instantly solves the problem. So I'll give you an example. If this were a federal income taxation class and there was a transfer between a husband and a wife, my first point of my outline is, was it a transfer between a husband and wife? Because if it is, I'm done right there. The next question would be, is it a transfer between family members? If that's true, I'm done right there. And then I'm going to keep walking down each point. So every one, I know that if I didn't meet the ones above it, then it must be this. And that's kind of how I do it.
I agree. It definitely depends on the type of exam. If it's solely multiple choice, yeah, you're just going to want to give yourself a straight answer and not confuse yourself. All of law school is teaching you how to argue every answer, and that's really hard for law students going into multiple choice because they feel like, well, I can argue why every single one of these answers is right. So you don't want to prep an excessive outline because then you're going to be in that mindset the day of the test. So prepping something like that that's more straightforward, this is just the law, this is the most right answer, is how you'd want to prep a multiple choice outline versus an issue spotter essay outline. I'm going to not only just like throw policy reasons behind, but I'm going to grab quotes from judges, things the professor said throughout the semester, fun analyses, and all of those things I'm going to throw in there because those are going to get me bonus points when the professor is grading it. When you're on a curve and it's you and another student are both the A student and they need something to differentiate you, little things like that, adding policy, background, quotes, things the professor themselves enjoys about that topic, that's what's going to make you stand out as a student. So you're going to have a way longer outline when you're looking at an essay versus a multiple choice exam.
What about how to use an outline? I know you're talking about specific notes you put in there and things, but any practical ways you are using it, either Sam for you ahead of time from your exams or Hayley, how you're using it on the exam itself, both of you on the exam itself too.
I think I do something that not a lot of other people do, specifically on issue spotters. I take time beforehand to write the entire rule statement paragraph out. And usually I'm not able to copy and paste, but I can just type it verbatim. I don't have to think about how do I structure the sentence. I don't have to think about how do I put these rules into it. I just type it. And then it's just the analysis section, and then I'm done. That way, it really saves me a lot of brain power that I can devote to other things. That's kind of, I think, the one interesting thing that I do. Other than that, I think Haley's probably going to say the same thing I'll say.
I do agree. I add all of my rule language straight into my outline as well. Some law students I know will do what's called pre-writing, where they will also pre-write the analysis section. I don't find that helpful for me because you can never guess what scenario you're going to be given, but having the rule language is great. On the actual exam, for me, I don't want my outline to ever be a crutch. You should know your outline well enough that you know where that header is or where that section is, or you can control F a keyword and then you can find it immediately. You should not be scrolling through your outline to try to find the answer on the while you're like live typing your essay. So making sure you know it forwards and backwards. So you're just using it either to double check or hurry and copy and paste like a rule language or something is what you're going to want to be using it for. Most of your time should not be in your outline. It should be on the actual essay itself. And that's just like as a tool to double check yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I find by the time I'm taking an actual exam and I have all of my like pretty materials ready in a stack with me, um, if it's an open book essay or something like that, I essentially have everything memorized and my outline is there as a fail-safe. But at that point, you've done so much studying and you know your outline so well, um, that it's just there as, yeah, like your safety net. Cool. Okay. Another question for you guys, and this is just preference, but maybe have you ever done this or has it worked or not worked? Should I split up the work and make an outline with a study group? Does it work? Could it work? Is it worth a shot?
I do not do mine with a group. I have friends who do it with a group and they love it and they all do different sections and then they come together and like do a teach moment where they teach each other their section, which is helpful for them to teach it out loud. I don't feel like I'll fully internalize that information if I didn't make that section of the outline myself. But what I do do is my few friends that we usually take almost every class with each other, we will all write our own outlines and at the end we'll all share them with each other and then I'll just check theirs against mine to see if there was anything I was missing that I didn't have and I'll copy and paste that in. So that's the closest I get to a group outline.
I don't disagree. That's probably the best idea. I've had numerous professors suggest the exact same thing to me and to a little class. I don't. It just doesn't work for me. Um, I think you'll find throughout this podcast, you're going to hear a lot of this might be the best thing, but that doesn't work for me. And I think it's important to figure that out for yourself. It's going to be a little bit of trial and error. Group study just has never really worked for me. Maybe that's just my personality, but it just doesn't for me. So I don't do it. it would probably help me, but I just don't.
Yeah, I find the same. I have shared outlines with classmates just to look and compare things, but it seems to me like if you split it up and just make different sections, if you don't go back to that section that somebody else made and really thoroughly go over it, it's almost like you're skipping that section entirely. So I think you kind of short yourself if you do that. But again, just preferences here. What about, okay, this kind of goes with some of the questions I've already asked you guys, but how useful is an actual outline? And maybe thinking about a comparison to should I just print out my actual notes? How useful is an outline compared to, why not just have every lecture note you ever took on the actual exam? Um, why outline? Because both of you do make outlines.
I think it is extraordinarily useful. I can think of two exams that I took. I only had three exams this semester. I took two of them, and two of them I think they were extraordinarily helpful. One of them was a pure issue spotter exam, or I guess not even issue spotter, it was more essay. And this professor happened to release past exams. I took those exams as practice exams, wrote my answers into my outline, and as it turned out, two of the five questions on the final exam I had already pre-written. So I had about an hour to do three questions that other people probably would have had like 40, 30 minutes to do. I have had a federal income taxation exam that I think I breezed through many different answers or questions because it was just right there in my outline. I didn't have to go back to the rule book, and I was pretty much 100% sure I got them right. I think those are the situations that's really helpful in.
I agree. I wouldn't just print out my notes, especially my reading notes, because as you go through the semester, your professor will make it clear what is important and what's not important. You'll do all this reading, then you come to class, and that's why class notes are so important because you learned, okay, what part of the reading did they want you to focus on? And you're not going to want to copy and paste all that into your outline because it's unnecessary. It's information you don't need to know. You'll also learn more if you have a midterm, if you get feedback, if they give you practice exams. So building the outline, number one is a memorization technique. You're just rereading all that information that you haven't touched for 3 months, but you're also like narrowing it down to what the most important focus is, and then you know what to focus on while you're studying and in the actual exam. I think it's incredibly important. I just barely took my first ever final where no outline was allowed at all. And I still made an outline because I wanted to use it as a memorization tool. And even just for that, it was so important to review all the information before I started practice exams.
Yeah. Yeah. So last question here, and I will lead an answer for this one because I have not weighed in on a lot of these questions. My last question for all of us is, should I even make an outline? And this one is a little bit favored toward me because I actually don't make my own outlines anymore. In my first semester of law school, I started making outlines like a month or so before classes ended. Everybody said start early. I didn't really know exactly what to do yet, but I ended up wasting, I think, a lot of time trying to recreate something that just was a copy of a lot of my notes. So that first semester, I did try to make my own. I did make my own. I started out with model outlines that other people had already made that I had access to, either from other classmates, previous classmates, or even my professors who had previous students who shared their outlines. Um, so it ended up being kind of a copy of all of those outlines anyway, and I just uh, spent a lot of time copying instead of doing practice and things like that. So since that semester, I haven't made my own outlines. Um, I instead work from an outline that is from somebody who's in a higher year in law school than me or something like that. And what I do is at the end of the semester, like a couple weeks before classes end, is I start going through that outline and I start reorganizing things if things need to be reorganized. I do go through my notes and I add or remove things from the outline from my notes and based on those. And what I start focusing on is doing practice essays and practice exams whenever they are available. This is the best for essays for me. And then I end up doing a lot of those pre-write answers and I end up saving those in a different document than my outline. But as I go through that, I have found that for me, it works better just to put the wheels to the pavement and just start practicing with something that has already been made, kind of a why reinvent the wheel kind of thing for me. But that's just me. I don't make my own. I still end up memorizing an outline that's already been put together. What about you guys? What do you think? Should I even make an outline for people maybe wondering in starting law school? Should they try it out first, see what works for them?
I definitely think your first semester you should try it out. I wouldn't just go based on someone else's outline for your very first finals ever. You could go in with their outline and your own, but I would not just go off their own. Try it out first as that memorization tool. Obviously, it's such a known thing because so many people use it. I think learning how to build an outline and how to use an outline that first semester is crucial. And then you can move into using someone else's once you know how to use an outline properly. So then move in your second semester to maybe using someone else's. I did that. There was one class, it was Con Law 1, where I had it second semester of my 1L year, and I did the same thing Beth does. I started with someone else's and then added my own notes to it. That was because that class we read like 150 cases or something like that. So my outline was like 130 pages by the end of it. And I was not going to go by hand add in case briefs for 150 cases, even though they were just short mini versions of case briefs. I was just going to use one that already existed, which is why I chose to do that. And it did work well, but I don't think it would have worked as well as it would have if I had done that first semester before I even knew what a law school final looked like, what it was, what that stress is like. So I would suggest at least first semester, try to make your own.
I think you can tell based on my past responses, I'm also firmly in the I think you should make outlines yourself camp, and not just for the reason that it's going to be helpful in the final, also because I think you learn as you do it. I think con law is a great example of that. I did not understand the Commerce Clause at all in class because there were probably 20 different cases we read on it. One that says one thing, one that says basically the opposite, and then one that kind of expands on both of those somehow. I only really understood it after I was making my outline and forced to consolidate all the cases, make my rule statements, and teach it to myself almost. I think, like I said before, that probably would have been helpful in a study group, but I didn't do that. Probably should have, but I ended up learning it by making my own outline. Um, I also think you become a lot more familiar with where things are. I think you also get around that with tabbing it, but I think being familiar and knowing exactly what I'm looking for is helpful for me, and it kind of gives me some more confidence going into the exam. I also think that if you don't do one in your first semester, you are kind of locked into not doing it again. I think after your first semester or two, though, do whatever you want, whatever works for you. If you're in Beth's shoes and you're like, this was a waste of my time, don't outline anymore. Don't do it. Just do your practice exams, throw those into a different document, use those on the exam, and you'll be fine. But I do agree with Beth absolutely that practice essays are beyond helpful. Also, being able to reference those during your exam, you might have made an argument in your practice exam that you're not thinking of during your exam. You flip back to it, you're like, wow, I am brilliant here. Let me copy that over real quick.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I echo both of you that you should try it out before you decide what works for you. And honestly, try it out, maybe try out different things your first semester, things like that. Take people's advice, but when that advice feels like it's not working for you as you're studying, pivot. Do something different. It's not too late until you actually take your exam and you'll see how things work for you when you get your first semester grades. And if you are unhappy with your grades, you can make changes. And that's one great thing about different semesters of law school, too. So, yeah, I do think it's helpful to try out different things to see what actually is going to work best for you. And then another thing that has was helpful about at least me doing kind of trial and error with making my own outlines first semester is that in your 2L and 3L year, you'll take more classes that are maybe more obscure than your 1L doctrinal classes that everyone at every law school across the country takes. And knowing how to put together that information from maybe those niche classes will be really helpful when something like an outline from somebody else doesn't exist.
Also
Beth, you're
emphasize
the only, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So I'd also emphasize, I don't know if you guys agree, if you are going to use someone else's outline, as much as possible, use one from a previous class member who took it with that professor. Don't use the commercial ones that like Themis or Barbary provide. You can look at those, but I would use one that was made by someone who took that class with that specific professor. That's going to be more helpful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've never like bought a commercial outline or something like that. I have always just used it from somebody who had my specific professor and like in a recent year, not from 10 years ago, right? But an outline from last fall, not 10 years ago from a different professor at a different school.
Do either of you have any advice for seeking out specific classmates? And first of all, just getting the courage to ask them, can I have your outline? Second of all, finding out, did you actually do well in this class? And is this going to be a good outline?
My school, at least, there's plenty of law societies and different clubs, and a lot of them have outline banks. So that's actually how I get a lot of my outlines from others and from upperclassmen. I don't know if that's what they're called in law school, but classes ahead of mine. But so I check out outline banks, and a lot of times with those outline banks from specific clubs that I'm a member of, they'll have a grade with the outline. Like this person got an A, this person got curve, which is B plus at my school. This person got an A minus, or the rare A plus, or something like that. So I'm going to favor the outlines that people did really well in the class. So those are shared pretty widely at my school. I don't know about you both if you have access in those ways.
This is similar. Your 1L year, 1L fall, we have what's called an ASP tutor, and I ended up being one my second year, which was really fun. And you're meant to meet with your little pot of 1Ls that you get assigned to a couple times throughout the semester to help them. And part of helping them is sending them your outlines. So they start with that. So I started with that, which was great. And as a requirement to be one of those tutors, you have to be in the like top certain percentage. I don't know what it is at the law school. So they know in general your grades are decent. So like your outlines are going to be decent. And then when I was a tutor, I was just very upfront with all of my little 1Ls. This is what grade I got on each of these. And then again, clubs is a great way to do it. A lot of clubs share those around, have banks, and then just becoming friends with the upperclassmen above you, and like just being confident enough to point blank ask. I don't know anybody who's ever said no to giving somebody an outline, but maybe be a little more strategic if you ask about the grade that they got on it. Make sure you're a little more closer friends before you ask that question. A lot of upperclassmen will also just offer it like, hey, like nice to meet you. If you ever need an outline, let me know. And
Mhm.
they're super open about sharing those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, my school is pretty similar that if you join clubs, you usually get access to some outline banks. I just want to echo that, what Haley said a little bit more, just so everyone hears this loud and clear. When we're a 2L and a 3L, we're going to look at the 1Ls as our little babies. And every 2L and every 3L will look at you the exact same way. They want to help you. Just ask for help.
They're
Yep.
not competing with you, so they don't care. They
Exactly.
just want to help you.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree more. People are pretty they're pretty generous with their materials and things, and people want you to do well. They want you to succeed. Um, Also, do either of you have TAs for your classes? Because all of my 1L classes also had TAs, and the TAs were also Teaching assistants. They were also resources for, they got a good grade in the class and then they became the TA, and they were resources for sharing outlines, and things like that.
We don't really have TAs. We do for our legal writing class 1L year, but that's really it. But I think it's because we're such a small law school. We have under 100 law students every class, so it's TAs aren't as needed as they are for bigger law schools.
Yeah, mine had TAs, I think for every 1L class, except for one professor who just outright refused for some reason to have them, which was annoying because that was the one class that really needed them. But also don't be afraid to go to office hours and really talk to the professors. You can't straight up ask what will be on the exam, but they will absolutely hint to you. You might want to spend a lot of time looking at this subject in particular. And if I had to guess, if I were designing an exam, I probably wouldn't spend too much time talking about this issue because we barely covered it. They're going to tell you that.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing with that is just like other students that are in higher years than you, your professors want you to succeed as well, especially, I think there's probably a line of kissing ass and just trying to learn. But if you toe that line correctly, your professors want you to succeed. So going to find out and get your questions answered and things like that, they'll want you to do well.
And it
Cool.
comes to your participation grade, which might be the one other thing that goes to your final grade other than your essay or multiple choice questions. So
Yep.
Yeah,
you don't have to be
that's
a
true.
gunner to get your participation points.
That's true. Yeah. All right, cool. Any final words of wisdom for incoming law students, future law students?
I think just the overall message here is do what works for you.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for joining us today and listening. You can email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.